As more and more details come to light about this massive $15 million loss by Brandon Turner, I am starting to ask myself one honest question. Was this deal in Katy, Texas, DOA? Was this deal destined to lose investor money the day it closed? Was it or was it not? Cody, I know neither you or I are invested in that deal. Thank goodness. I know you or I never saw the PPM. Thank goodness. But as more and more investors go on YouTube and talk about their loss, one gentleman having a $75,000 loss, I think it is becoming pretty obvious to me that this particular deal was at best not guaranteed and at worst DOA the day it closed. What say you?
Well, one of my buddies, his friend actually did put in $100,000 and that money's gone. As far as the underwriting, I'd have to challenge the integrity of what they were, like how they were underwriting the deal. Because you look at what Brandon posted, 2.3 million NOI to 3.6 million. Anybody can do a value add deal. The question is, are you underwriting for the fact that you're overpaying on the entrance? Because he bought it. I mean, 2.3 million. I think he paid 72. What is that? A 3.19 cap rate, something like that.
Wow.
People are saying, "Oh, we bought around a 4 cap." Do the math, and then you look at what his underwriting was. He's like, "Well, we hit our projections. We got to 3.6 million NOI. That is a pro forma 5 cap." Which means, for those who don't understand, you pay cash, you get a 5% cash on cash return. It takes 20 years to recapitalize your cash investment if your NOI doesn't change.
Right.
For one, that's a long period of time, but that also doesn't include the millions of dollars that they spent on renovations. That's just factoring for, I paid this and now the rents are here. Well, they did that through spending a bunch of money that they raised.
It wasn't zero. It wasn't zero. Yeah.
Which means that their pro forma cap rate was in the 4s.
Maybe.
Yeah. It depends how much they spent, but based on their raise, it's going to be in the 4s, mathematically speaking. So best case scenario, you get into the mid 4% cap rate range. If you hit your projections, which he did, and he's saying, well, cap rates went up, so it killed my value. Well, no, you bought on too low of a cap rate, too low of a pro forma cap rate.
That's what's good. I mean, if we just cut to the chase at the end of the day, and again, he's not alone here. He's just the most public figure. I think Brandon Turner probably got more people interested in real estate investing than any other human being alive. So it's unfortunate that, this happened, but I think what's going to come out of this is this they overpaid. And it was really the environment. Again, I'm an accredited investor, right or wrong. I have been one for more than 15 years. I saw all kinds of deals come across my desk in 21 and 22. They all had stupid low cap rates at point of acquisition, like this one. They all had crazy assumptions like 5% rent growth for 5 years. They all assumed that the exit cap rate would be below the cap rate they bought, which is just retarded, right? When you're already buying at record lows and you think they're going lower. And that's why, again, no one can say this because it would be fraud or whatever it would be called. But I really do think that this deal and many like them that closed in 2022 were dead, complete losses the day they closed, because none of those assumptions can happen. No logical person with a decade of experience would think this would turn out any other way.
Mark brought up something, Mark, the financial firefighter, because we do our live every Monday. And he said, well, maybe they were just buying deals because there's a lot of mouths to feed and it's big business. And I said, I hope not, because that's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, I don't know if it's technically probably not a Ponzi scheme. So I'm going to hope that Brandon did not do this, but I know with certainty there are other large syndicators who had large sales teams that were increasingly doing skinnier and skinnier and skinnier deals to pay the bills, to keep the lights on. And that's bad. That's terrible.
My question on that, I may be misunderstanding a Ponzi scheme, but if you have to keep doing bigger and bigger deals and raise more and more money to pay today's bills, I'm failing to see how that doesn't fall into that category.
Well, again, not to split hairs, but a Ponzi scheme is where you take money from one investor and pay another investor. Okay. Here, they are selling bigger and bigger deals just to pay operational overhead. So technically, you're not missing money up. So again, it's a technicality. I know what you're saying, but I don't want, I'm not going to call it a Ponzi scheme. You can call it bad operations. You can call it, bad deals, certainly, but I think it's certainly a step
pyramid scheme or something.
There you go. That might be better. That might be better. Yeah, it's kind of like a multi-level thing. So that could work. But yeah, at the end of the day, what really gets me is, and I now think there's going to be hundreds of billions of dollars lost, right? We talk about this 15 million like it's going to be the only one or is the only one. There have been hundreds of billions of dollars lost, and there will be hundreds of billions of dollars more lost as we go forward, because this is not over, Cody. As tragic as this 15 million is, it's going to become a weekly cadence of more and more LPs losing money, because the deals that closed in 21 and early 2022 had bad assumptions. And, when rates go from 3 to 7 and cap rates go from 3.5 to 6.5, you're going to lose. Everybody's going to lose. Even the good operators are going to lose if their debt is short. That's the other thing that gets me, is the people that are losing today had 1, 2, 3, 4-year debt. If you have 10-year debt or 30-year fixed rate debt, you can survive. You can outhold this season, but you can't when the debt blows up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm curious what it would take for this to repeat. Like, what events would have to build confidence in investors to get in this situation again? Because it seems like there's enough folks talking about it online, like long-term fixed rate debt, cash flow and margin, have a cap rate above your rate factor. Yeah. Like, if you do that, you survive.
So again, I've seen this cycle before. I've said this many times, and I think it's true. Investors, so, you and I and people we know, we have 10-year memories, but real estate's a 12-year cycle. So we will eventually forget just as the next bubble or stupidity or masses blows up. And this is why I do what I do. I love to see where all the investors are going, because when the masses or the lemmings go one direction, I instinctively go the other direction. That's how I avoided all the pain from 21 and 22. It's like, oh my God, all these people are going that way. I am going the opposite direction.
Yeah. Get out of Dodge.
Yeah. So, the other thing, I just spoke with somebody who's done 35 syndications, right? He's an LP. So not a GP, he's an LP, right? He's, in Brandon's example, he's part of the 15 million that got lost, right? So he's an LP. And he gave me one line that I thought was really powerful. He goes, Michael, if you're like, you need to figure out if the GP is a marketer or an operator. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Those are sexy words. What do you mean? He goes, if your guy or girl is posting on Instagram about this deal, they are not an operator. They're a marketer. And if you run into a GP that's a marketer, run. No second guessing. Run. Operators don't go on Instagram. They have a solid Rolodex of investors that just keep repeating and reinvesting. They don't have to market. They don't talk. They don't write books. So what do you think about that? Marketer versus operator?
Well, I think about some of the best people in the space that I know. Ken McElroy, he does both.
That's true. Yeah.
So take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I know some syndicators who they're all over Instagram showing the life. They've made it. And what they've made is a business that's paycheck to paycheck. So
yeah. Well, it's also likely going to run into the mountain and crash and burn, because a lot of these folks got short. And again, it's back to Brandon's deal, right? I guarantee you he and the entire team were ecstatic to close that deal. But in hindsight, they overpaid. They overpaid by a lot. And that was just the environment. Easy debt, easy to raise. I mean, I'm sure Brandon could go on Instagram and do one little post and get $3, $4, $5 million before the day was out. That's just where we were in 21 and 22. It won't be that way now.
Well, what's interesting, and this is just a question I want to put out there, maybe you have thoughts on it or maybe you don't. his ability to raise money, if it was such a good asset, I would have thought he would have re-raised, restructured, and recapitalized the deal, because you can always do that. Ken McElroy's done that many times. Cardone's done it a bunch of times. People do it all the time. And you just bring in new equity with a new proposal based on the quality of the asset.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, now we're splitting hairs on this deal, and I'm going to take Brandon for his word. So I'm not going to second guess what he said. It sounds like they did do a capital call and were successful, but then the lender reneged or whatever, and they had to find a new lender, and the capital call went from, I don't know, 3 million to 13 million. And it was just a step too far. You couldn't go back to the well again.
Well, I'm not saying go to the existing investors. I'm saying bring in new investors.
Oh, new investors. I got you.
You basically are selling that.
A recap. Yeah.
Yeah. You're recapitalizing the deal through external capital. And, if that would only be worth it if the property was worth it, like to the fund, or the brand damage was worth it. But that didn't happen, of course.
Yeah. The other thing that Brandon said, and again, I'm going to take him at his word, is it's really interesting. And I saw this last time, so I actually have real experience with this. What happens when the market turns is banks, lenders, they actually foreclose on the good properties first. Because in this example, for example, in real life, the lender was unscathed. The lender got back 100% of their loan. It was only the equity that was burned.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like Brandon has at least one, if not more, problem properties. But they're not as good an asset. So the bank's working with them, bending over left, right, and center to try to save it. And I saw that last time. The worst assets get the longest extend and pretend. It's kind of weird.
That is interesting. That's not something I would have thought about, because I've also not played with a bunch of really nice stuff.
Yeah. You and me both, brother.
Getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you are now, man. You're 1031ing into some new construction. Your portfolio will be entirely different in 24 months.
It is pretty exciting. I have some people potentially lined up to buy the old properties, and there may be a universe in 24 months where my oldest property is my little house on the Hood Canal that was built in 97.
Yeah. So there you go. I think, if I was a betting man, and I am, I would say there's a better than 50-50 chance that's a true statement in 24 months. Because I think that's where your mind's at. I think that's where you want to go. And good karma and the universe and all of that, it's just going to go that direction, I think.
Getting there. I mentioned to you a few months ago, I was going to get to 70 townhomes, and that might be it. Well, I'm at 56.
Shit, that's really close. That's like, yeah, you're right there, man.
Wow.
That's going to be good. Well, let's try to wrap this conversation up at Brandon's deal. Let's actually, let's step back. Let's not talk about Brandon's deal. Let's just talk about the market at that time, because you were very active, right? That was when you were building your portfolio and just adding risk, or at least in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
How crazy was that environment back in 21 and 22 for just deals and raising capital? I mean, you were seeing it everywhere.
Well, people weren't buying the properties I was buying, for one. I was also structuring very creative deals where I was getting stuff 10% down. And when I was doing stuff, my underwriting was very simple. You have the long-term debt, and you have a rate factor that is less than the cap rate. So your rate factor, for those who don't know, it's your annual debt service, just principal and interest divided by your loan amount. That's all it is. It shows your true realized cost of capital. If that's lower than your cap rate, which is the dividend when you pay cash, I could borrow as much money as I wanted to, and I'd still make money on other people's money. And that was the way I did things. But the other thing you did, I'm sorry to interrupt. The other one that made me feel really good, and you dropped this on me like a year ago, is when you looked at a deal, you wanted to understand how you could get to a DSCR of 2 or greater. And that's unheard of. Well, yeah. I mean, bare minimum 1.5, but getting to 2 is a solid place to be.
Yeah.
Because that means every time you make a mortgage payment, you save a mortgage payment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a strong position. So a lot of people didn't underwrite that way. They wanted to see how they could buy it and then, get a little bit of cash flow. The problem is, if you're at a 1.2 debt coverage ratio, you're not paying yourself cash flow.
No. Yeah. You're lucky not to dip into your own account at that level.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can get your stuff to 1.5, great. But you need to make sure that you can get your rate factor less than your cap rate. So that dividend that it produces has to be less than the realized cost of capital. And where I was getting at is a lot of people made sure that their cap rate was higher than their interest rate.
Yeah.
The problem is if you buy at a 7 cap and you have 6% interest on a 30-year AM, your realized cost of capital is 7.19. So you're actually losing money because of the debt pay down. And people don't think about it like that. That's why a lot of people got in a tricky situation.
Yeah. The last thing to say about this environment, it's really funny. I don't know if it's not funny. It's weird. And that is syndications were the worst investments in 21 and 22. And I think they're going to be probably the best investments in 2027. Why is it weird? Because in 21 and 22, it was extremely easy. Nobody could raise money. In 2027, not a lot of LPs going to be investing in syndications. And those will be some of the safest ones done is when you're buying at 60% of debt and 50% of repair costs or replacement value. So it's going to be fun to watch.
One day at a time.
There you go, brother. Where can they find you?
Cody Davis Business Adventures on YouTube every Tuesday and Thursday.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.